Hello, Assalamu alaikum. Today we will be discussing over a very important topic of the IGCSE Human Biology syllabus, that is the air. So we all know that beside our head, on our head, beside our eyes, there are two pieces of skin, flappy skins, and we know that they are our basic hearing devices, and we simply call them air. So before we move further into this topic, we have a few points and objectives that we need to keep in mind that we have to understand. These are number one, the structure of the air and its main functions, how the air processes sound waves to produce the sound we hear, how the air acts as the balance control of the body, and how the air is sensitive to sound frequencies and different pitches. Now over here, we have a detailed structure of the air. As you can see, I have divided the air into three parts: the outer air, middle air, and the inner air. The outer air is this part of the air, the middle air is this part, and the inner air is this part. Well, let's start with the outer air since it is the first section of the human air. The outer air starts from this part to the eardrum. We all know this part. This is basically the skin that is available for us to visualize, to see when we look in the mirror. This part is on the external side of the body. This skin, if you have ever tried probably to twist it or maybe bend it, you must have felt that this one is actually not completely bony, nor is it completely boneless. It is somewhere in the middle. This skin is known as the pinna, and it is made up of cartilage, and hence it has such structure. So the pinna has a very important function. The function of the pinna is that it collects the sound waves from the surrounding and concentrates them, and then sends them along the auditory canal to the eardrum. After the pinna comes the auditory canal, which is the air canal. It starts from here to the eardrum, and it is basically a funnel shape. It is funnel shaped because it allows the sound waves to pass through it more efficiently. The basic function of the air canal is to allow the sound waves to reach the eardrum longitudinally, and hence in this way the eardrum can receive the sound waves more effectively and turn them into vibration and send them into the inner ear for the brain to detect them as electrical impulses. Now, the air canal has another very important function, that is, it helps to maintain an optimum temperature and an optimum humidity for the eardrum so that the eardrum can stay safe and it can perform effectively. Next is the eardrum. The eardrum, we are all familiar with the eardrum very much because it is a very common thing. All right, so the eardrum is basically an oval membrane which is at the end of the external ear and the starting of the middle ear. So what is the basic function of the eardrum? The basic function of the eardrum is that it catches the sound waves and vibrates. These vibrations are passed to the bones of the middle ear, and the bones of the middle ear, these tiny bones, in turn vibrate and pass this vibration to the inner ear, where it is sent as electrical impulses to the brain to be detected as sound. The eardrum also helps to keep the external ear and the middle ear separate. Hence, the pressure inside the middle ear is maintained at a constant way so that it does not hamper the processes of the ear, the normal functioning of the ear. Also, the eardrum protects the inner ear from the external environment so that no pathogens, probably small insects or even dust particles or sand particles, can enter the inner ear or the middle ear and cause any harm. Here we have a few information of the outer ear. The outer ear has a visible part called the pinna, and the outer ear is concerned with the transmission of the sound, and it consists of the pinna, the air canal, and the eardrum, which is also known as the tympanic membrane. All right. Now moving on to the middle ear. The middle ear is a very complex structure. It is a very small air-filled cavity, and it consists of two things. That is, one, the ear ossicles, and these three bones make up the ear ossicles, and one tube which is the extrusion tube. All right. So first, beginning with the aerosicles. The aerosicles are basically three smallest bones of the body. They are the malleus, anvil, and the stapes. So you see they have different names also. The hammer, anvils, which is the incus, and the stirrup, which is the stapes. Why? Because of their shapes. So what is the function of these aerosicles is that when they receive the vibrations from the eardrum, when the sound waves hit the eardrum and it vibrates, it passes the vibrations to these bones, and these bones pass the vibration from the external ear to the inner ear. The stapes is the smallest bone of the human body. The stapes is connected to this part of the inner ear via a window. This is called the oval window. So the oval window is responsible for taking the vibrations from the stapes into the inner ear through it. Next is the escutcheon tube. The escutcheon tube is a very important part of the ear. It is a narrow canal that starts from the base of the middle ear and goes all the way down to the pharynx. And its main function is to keep the air pressure on both sides of the ear drum equal. In this way, the air activity is not hampered and the ear can work efficiently. Also, the eustachian tube actually connects the ear to the throat and the nose. Here we have some information regarding the middle ear. That is, the middle ear is a small with air-filled space connecting the outer ear and the inner ear. The primary function of the middle ear is to conduct sound waves via the tympanic membrane, which is the eardrum, to the cochlea via the air bones. Smallest membrane are present here. We read about it, that is malleus, incus, and stapes. And these bones are collectively known as ossicles, and sound waves cause them to vibrate. And we learned about the escutcheon tube also. Now moving on to the last part of the ear, which is the inner ear. So the inner ear is another very complex structure. This is actually a complex structure, and I won't deny. And this is this actually inner ear is this part. So the inner ear consists of three parts: the semicircular canals, the vestibule, which is here. These are the three semicircular canals, and one snail shell-like thing, a very coiled tube, which is called cochlea. So each part of the inner ear is responsible for different function. The inner ear is basically known as the organ of balance. The semicircular canals and the vestibule are basically responsible for the maintaining of the balance and posture and movement. And the cochlea is basically responsible for taking the sound waves as electrical impulses, like generating electrical impulses to send them to the brain. Now let's have a look at this diagram so we can understand easily. This is the outer ear, this is the middle ear, and this one is the inner ear. So let's talk about the cochlea first. The cochlea has a structure that runs through its coiled tube, and it is known as the organ of Corti. The organ of Corti contains many receptor cells, very sensitive receptor cells, which are probably hair cells. And these cells are responsible for catching the sound vibrations and turning them into electrical impulses so that they can be detected, they can be sent to the brain and can be detected as sound waves. Now, a very important fact is that the cochlea and the semicircular canals are basically fluid filled. So you can say that the medium of the middle ear was air, so the medium of the inner ear is fluid filled. All right. So what happens here is that when the pinna gathers the sounds and sends it to the eardrum vibrates and passes it through the aerosicles, through the stapes in the oval window. The sound vibrations pass into the structure of the cochlea. These vibrations travel along the fluid filled canal and from the oval window, you see, along the length of the outer cochlea. So what happens here is that the sensory cells, the receptor hair cells, they catch the vibrations and transfer them and transmit them into electrical impulses and send them to the brain via the auditory nerve, which is connected to the cochlea. So via the auditory nerve, it is sent to the cerebellum of the brain, and the other vibrations pass to the round window, So there are two windows. As you can see, there's an oval window and a round window. So what is the function? So their function is that the vibrations of the oval window are transmitted to the fluid in the outer canal, causing the sensory hairs to be stretched. The receptor cells respond by producing nerve impulses in the receptor neurons. In this way, the sound is converted into nerve impulses and sent to the brain. The round window vibrates with the opposite phase to the vibrations entering the inner ear and through the oval window. This allows for pressure changes between the middle ear and the cochlea. So as you can see, we have completed this part of the inner ear. And here are a few points about the inner ear that we discussed right now. Just have a quick review that the inner ear has two main functions, that is to convert the sound waves into electrical signals for the brain and maintain balance by detecting position and motion. And the ear has three main parts, which is the cochlear, semicircular canals, and vestibule. Cochlear is fluid filled. Also, the semicircular canals are fluid filled, and vestibule and semicircular canals help to balance. Now, since we have completed this, here's a short summary of how the ear detects sounds. You can have a quick review that the sound waves directed into the ear canal by the pinna. Sound waves cause eardrum to vibrate. Vibrations pass to ear Vibrations amplified and pass along the cochlea. Vibrations stimulate hair sensory cells in cochlea. Hair cells send electrical impulses to the brain via the auditory nerve. So this is the cochlea, and this one is the auditory nerve, which is connected to the cochlea. This one sends directly the electrical impulses to the cerebellum of the brain, so that the brain can detect them and know that we're hearing a sound. Now, since we have finished that part, now it comes why the ear is known as the organ of balance. So as I say, the semicircular canals and vestibules are connected to this part. The semicircular canals consist of the sacculus and the utriculus. These are the two parts of the semicircular canal. This one is the utriculus, and this one is the sacculus, and these are the ampullars, and this one is the vestibule. So the semicircular canals, the utriculus and the sacculus, are filled with a gel-like mass, which is known as the cupula. So what happens is the cupula, the movement of the fluid in the semicircular canal causes the cupula to pull on the hair cells. So when the hair cells are pulled in whichever direction, this cell stimulates to the brain, and which generate the nerve impulses, and the nerve impulses reach the brain, so that your brain can know, according to the movement of the cupula fluid, which way your head is moving. So it helps in detecting movement in any direction. Also, the sacculus and reticulus contain the hair cells embedded in a jelly containing the calcium carbonate salts, which is known as otolith. The weight of the otolith pulls the hair stimulating cells and producing nerve impulses. These give information out to the brain about the position of the head, and this is a very important factor. So basically, focusing on the movement of the hair cells due to the pull of the fluid by the cupula, the brain can detect, since nerve impulses are being generated, which way our head is moving, and hence we can balance. Now, since we have completed that part, here is a short summary of how do we hear. We have completed this earlier. You can go through this for a short recap. Now we move to the last part of our topic, which is how ear responds to different frequencies. Well, the main function of ear is hearing. So the human ear is very sensitive to sounds. The brain determines the frequency of the sound by detecting which hair cells are being stimulated. The ear is sensitive to different types of frequencies. The hair cells which are nearest to the oval window are sensitive to high frequency sounds, while those near to the round window are sensitive to low frequency sounds. So what happens is the loudness of the sound is determined by the amplitude of the vibrations of the hair cells. The loud sounds produce high amplitude vibrations, which result in more nerve impulses per second in sensory neurons, and vice versa is for the amplitude of lower amplitude vibrations actually. So what happens is that the frequency is basically detected by the hair cells at different locations of the oval window and the round window, and hence these hair cells receptors take the stimulus and send it to the brain so the brain can detect the nerve impulses and respond to the type of sound the ear is being exposed to. Exposure to louder noise for a longer time period can lead to temporary deafness or a ringing sound called the tinnitus. Yes, it is true that a very loud sound can be very harmful for the ear, and this is very common and we all know about. So what happens how is that however prolonged exposure to very loud sound can lead to permanent hearing loss since they damage the sensitive hair receptor cells and might result in noise induced hearing loss or NIHL. The NIHL can be completely preventable by avoiding exposure to sounds over 85 decibels. So why the hair cells are the main part here, why they're being the main part over here is because if the hair cells are damaged due to very high sounds, okay, because they're very sensitive, so no hair cells, which means that no stimulus is converted into no vibration, sound vibrations is converted into electrical impulses. So no impulses is being sent to the brain. So the brain is not knowing of the sound. Hence, it can lead to permanent hearing loss. And the NIHL, which is the noise induced hearing loss, can be completely prevented by avoiding exposure to sounds over 85 decibels. Sounds which are lower than 75 decibels are unlikely to cause any harms. So, which means that the ear is very sensitive to these sounds, and hence we should always be aware of what type of sounds we are exposing to our ear so that we do not cause any damage to it. It is a very sensitive organ and a very important organ of the body. So, seems like we have reached our end. I hope you liked the lecture. Thank you.